Here we go. Hello, people of Connecticut. I am here with Daniel Miressi, who is running for Connecticut District 4. And we're going to have a fun little conversation. Jason will pop in with us in a little while. So let's just get right to it. Daniel, because Daniel's on a deadline today, and I wanted to make sure we got this in. So Daniel, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we can go back and forth, and I'll see what I have questions about.
Absolutely. Well, I actually not mu anything special. I'm just, a hockey coach, born and raised in Monroe, Connecticut. Went to Trumbull High.
Oh,
Uh,
no kidding.
yep.
My husband did
Nope.
too, but
Nope.
probably long before you did.
I graduated 2007, so I was born in 1989,
All right.
and I went to Framingham State College, played hockey, and then did my whole Peter Pan 20s, playing minor league stuff, and I got back when it's moved back to Connecticut, back home, like, a lot of us do when I was 29, 30 years old. Um, Found a great girlfriend, fiance,
Mm.
and, finally I put up tents for a while. It was kind of like a little aimless, and I was actually working at the post office in 2022 when that was, at I guess kind of the descending point of COVID, but
Yeah,
it
had a
was
great.
still pretty, at the forefront. And I had always been, so just a little about why I like politics is I've always I never really liked school. I loved reading. I think they have a phrase for it, autodidact, so
Yeah.
I was always diving into books. School bored me. Hockey. School was just about staying eligible for hockey, getting a 2.8 to stay on the team, which
Nice.
I did. And but anyway, my I always loved reading, and believe it or not, my maturation came from driving around New England for 3 4 hours, and my dad, it was uh, Rush Limbaugh at noon.
Mm.
Savage at 3, Levin at 6, Bob Grant mixed in there,
Uh,
Paul Harvey, the rest of the story, and that kind of came routine. And it's funny because that was always in the back of my mind, and I'm saying all that to say because I'm not uncommon like everybody else. Politics was always something I like to talk about at bars, and in the locker room, but it never really was something like, oh, I want to be a politician or I want to do this.
yeah.
And like, so back to the post office, I was working at the post office, and the COVID stuff was going on. And, I'm thinking here now, I'm 30 years old. I'm trying to move out of my parents' place. By standards that my dad bought a house and raised a family on clerk, and then he became a postmaster. My mom worked at Burndy in Norwalk, just doing payroll,
Mm.
nothing abnormal. And I lived the idyllic 90s Connecticut bucolic, childhood.
Hmm.
And I love working. I've always been an athlete, and here I am grinding, grinding, grinding. And I have one manager telling me to put on my mask. I have other guys, picking up overtime because other guys are, just something felt off. I'm not hating on the post office. I love those people. And I decided to get involved locally in Norwalk. And by get involved, it was Bob Stefanowski's campaign, and I wanted to actually. He was doing a speech in Norwalk RTC. I'd never been before, and I can thank the first lady for this. She dragged me to it. She's like, "I'm tired of you just yelling at Twitter. Like, if you're gonna do something, do something." I was like, "You know what? You're right."
I
So
love that you call her the first lady. That is so cute. It is.
thank you. But so we went there and we heard Bob, and like Bob was good, and I really just wanted to tell him, hey, what do you need for this area? I want to help you with messaging to under 40 because I don't think the Connecticut
Hmm.
GOP or anyone really understands what's going on the ground here. And it's not just taxes and this, it's the schools, it's the social square, it's the whole cycle of what's happening. And the COVID stuff was especially big for young people my age. Like I said, I coached hockey, and they were making kids wear masks while skating around in rinks. I was like, this is crazy. This isn't, like, what are we doing here? The whole world was flipped upside down. So I know it's been a long intro, but to cut it short, I ended up staying for the meeting, and I realized this is when it brings you into the whole other issue of the CTGOP. Literally, the Fred Williams, who is the Norwalk chair, and Bob Duff is the senator from Norwalk, who is the state Senate majority leader, who is third in line for the governor's, governor, third most powerful guy. And they're standing there in the room like, so does anyone want to run against the, state? And I'm looking around and I'm thinking like they must have something. And it was like a classroom. And I was like, I mean, I raised my hand just out of like, just because I don't even know why, to be honest. And I was just like, I guess if you don't find anyone, I'll do it. Like, because in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, oh, state Senate, how, crazy can it be? There must be a process. And then, so that's how I got into it. And back to the first lady, luckily she, works in the corporate world and C-suite world. And we attacked my campaign and I had a lot of support from Darien. And we just kind of, like I like to say that Zohan Mandami and the Viveks of the world stole our campaign ideas from 2022.
Uh-huh.
And after that, we had a good showing. We won Darien and,
Hmm.
brought out a lot of the vote, a lot of independence. You know, I decided then I could either stay here and scrap it out, try to build my own brand and try to help forge something new in Connecticut and be a part of the new Republican process. Or I could do what all other people do and just give up and say, oh, the state's corrupt, move to Florida. And
Hmm.
like to me, I mean, maybe it'll come to that, but I mean, this is my home. I'm a Trumbull kid. I went to Wonderland. I coach at Shelton, like I like Wolf Park. And anyone who knows is in New England, like New England nationalism, New England Republicans, like we are real and it is different. You know, we believe in a lot of the MAGA doctrine, but it's also a little bit different. I'm not saying it's not MAGA, but it's a little more curtailed to our life and our region. So sorry for that long-winded intro, but I just wanted to give you a pretty decent synopsis.
Okay, so we're gonna dive right in here. So one of the things that's been coming up a lot lately in my conversations on X, which is how we know each other.
The Everything app.
Yeah, so many people are like, oh, it's too contentious. Well, it's only contentious if you want to be contentious.
Yeah, it's a
You
social
know?
square.
Yeah, it's the social square. You can just look. You do not have to engage. Are a human being. You have free will. It's okay. You can step back and say, I don't have to say anything. It's okay. But I often do say something. So there you go. But one of the things that's been coming up quite a lot, and that I don't know if do you remember the Tea Party movement?
Of course, Mr. Ron Paul.
Okay, yeah. So one of the founders of the Tea Party movement, Court was on, I can't pronounce his last name. God bless the man. He's great. And he was working with Jason and I on the Connecticut GOP. And one of the conversations we had was about sort of traditional Republicans versus those people that traditional Republicans think of as rhinos. So we're going to use the rhino word. So, and that's been my observation. However, I think it's worth noting in Connecticut that when one references, not me, but one references the Republican base, who are you talking about? Because that sure ain't any majority. Even if we did have 40% of people in the state-ish who voted for Trump, there is the GOP is like very small compared to the number of, it's like we have a majority of independents in this state.
Oh, actually, it's a
Yeah.
majority unaffiliated.
Or independent,
Yeah,
yeah,
which yeah, well,
specific.
I want to
Not
make it.
not
I want
Democrat or Republican.
I
It's like,
want to make it very clear that the Independent Party in Connecticut is. I wouldn't even say Democrat light anymore. They're just full blown Democrats from like Obama
oh,
era.
oh,
In my opinion, and if you look into their scandals and the people who lead the party, there's a lot of surreptitious stuff. But to answer your question, so like I said, I'm a little bit younger,
interesting.
and I always laugh at this kind of stuff because no offense to my parents' generation, I love my parents, but they're a little out of touch. And the rhino stuff and all, like it's fun and games, but to me, the only thing that Republican Party represents is Main Street, is your town, your way of life. And there's a lot of that gets a little gray area, like in the social square and stuff. But I think that's why people have demarcation points and people figure it out with, voting and the way their towns is run, the way their schools are run.
Mhm.
And but I think that we all have a certain way that we want our state and our country and our American society to be run. And to me, conservative values means protecting that and allowing people to pursue their happiness in any way, shape, or form,
Mhm.
decoupled from the government. So, like to me, the country club Republicans are just the other side. I like to call them country club Republicans or seersucker
Oh,
Republicans.
you're not the first person to use that
Yeah,
term here. So,
and to me, I love them. I'm a golfer. I love the country club. Like we are WASP. Like that is our culture. Like that's how Connecticut. And I don't think it's a nasty term. Like God
mhm,
bless those people. They built rules and found and conservative foundations. When it comes to markets and when it comes to decorum, social decorum. You just talked about X. You
mhm,
know, you have the freedom of speech, but I like to think that, Connecticut, when we go out in public, we know how to be polite. You could be terse, you could be tough,
mhm,
but that doesn't mean, you have to be polite. There's a certain way to
mhm,
communicate. And I think that a lot of defining, what makes a good Republican, what makes a bad Republican, distracts us from the mission.
mhm,
The real enemy is the radical
yep,
left. The
mhm,
Democrats today, even the most moderate ones, and I actually feel bad for the Democrats I meet on the street, the ones that drop their kid off at hockey that I coach,
mhm,
they they are grow Connecticut is it's a double-edged sword, right?
mhm,
We are still a successful state, dining out on how successful and how much money we have here,
mhm,
but
mhm.
the party's coming to an end.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are still don't realize that that whole JFK Blue Dog Democrat Union whatever that their grandfather and father voted for in Connecticut, that
Mhm,
party's been dead for a long time.
mhm,
At least since I've been alive. And
mhm,
now whether they like it or not, the people leading that party, Beta Bob Duff, Ned Lamont, he pretends to be moderate, but look at this housing bill. He's a radical. Chris Murphy today is trying to, start
oh,
another civil war with the president.
oh,
Jim Himes is nowhere to be found. Rosa Dolores lost her mind. Whether they're deliberate or not, they're Hakeem Jeffries, AOC, Mondami. They are positioning to be just 21st century American communists, and that's the enemy. To me, you're only as good as your worst player, and I think the fault is the gatekeepers of the Republican Party not realizing that they're really the ones holding back the Big Ten. Believe it or not, we have a lot more I have a lot more in common with like an average Democrat on things like the economy and stuff like that. We probably differ on social issues, but
mhm,
like I said before, I'm a 90s kid. Fresh Prince of Bel-Air was on at the same time as Saved by the Bell. Like it's not as big of a deal as people think it is. I think the left uses it as a weapon to push through policy that has destroyed the American dream. And the Republic, I guess to answer your question succinctly, to me, the Republican Party is preserving the American dream. And I think from the country club to the White House, in past generations, even this one, there's a few issues. I think that they have been not doing that in the best way that they can. And that's what I hope to represent.
okay. So how do you think, we talk about the New England nationalism thing has come up a bit. And
Mhm.
being my roots are from Maine, and
Oh yeah.
my mother is living in the house where she was born. She's in her 90s, and she plans to leave the planet there. So
God bless her.
this house has been in my family's been in Maine in that spot for 300 years. So we got deep roots here. And and so I wonder if you could talk to me a little bit about that specific flavor of New England pride.
Well, I mean, it's very simple. The Pilgrims landed here. I went to school in Massachusetts. We all know about Plymouth Rock and everything. Connecticut's the Constitution state.
Hmm.
Um, most of our signers from the Declaration, at least half of them are from New England. Like this is where the whole process of constitutional government was founded. New London is in Connecticut. They didn't just, it's after London. Like it's not that complicated. New Haven is our first planned city. You talk about places like Maine and New Hampshire. I grew up going to New Hampshire as a kid, and even Vermont. One of my fun, interesting things about Vermont is it has one of the highest gun ownerships in the state. Same thing with Maine. And Vermont's an easy one because Maine's politics are a little more complicated. But Vermont is one of the most liberal states in the world, yet they have one of the most gun ownership because New England, like I said, and I wouldn't go up there and think that, they're not, going out for shoots every, like it's their lifestyle, just like in Maine, though, the bear hunting scene, it's the way that they live.
Hmm.
And what I think is unique about New England, and I'll challenge anybody from any region, is I do think that we are the most enlightened region when it comes to government, when it comes to self-sufficiency. Every outside of, Virginia, where, most of our first presidents came from,
Hmm.
the entire epicenter of American values, that strong, for example, every small town you go to in Connecticut and across New England, at the center of it is a church. That doesn't mean that they made everyone walk into that church, but it was to symbolize that agrarian Jeffersonian, socialism, that community that they were going for, which was we have a town center, we have a schoolhouse, because the church served as a meeting house, it served as a place where people got mail, it served as a place where they held trials or they had meetings, whatever they had to do. And I think New England has always been the template for everything in American life. Like you talk about Maine and people don't realize how rural Maine and like ups and how dense the
And how
forest is.
big it is.
Yeah, I mean, just look at our manifest destiny, right?
Hmm.
You know, in the 1850s, all those people, some of the ones you read, if you read about their letters, they come from Boston, they come from Maine, Henry David Thoreau type of characters. And
Yeah.
they were able to navigate the West because of the foundational knowledge and the courage and the lifestyle of New England. New England is literally the birthplace of America, and I would argue that to anybody. Every one of our values comes here. And I'm sick and tired of Democrats trying to preach this value, that value. It's like we don't have to look far. You could, even now in Connecticut, you can drive around, drive to Derby, drive to Shelton,
Hmm.
go to Norwalk and Sono. If you close your eyes, you could see the dock workers.
Yeah.
You could see everything going on. You could see the buildings. You could see the young families. It's the same thing. When you talk about New Haven, Mark Twain lived in New Haven next to Harriet Beecher Stowe. The Great Gatsby is based off of, Southern Connecticut, Long Island. I mean, Long Island's bit, but you know what I mean? That Northeast, that's where our culture, that's where our founding, that's where our greatest doctors, Boston, Yale, everything has come from that. And I think we need to be proud of that. And I think we need to embrace that. And I think that that's one issue that the right loses on is the left moves the football because
Hmm.
granted, economic policies and all that stuff, like I don't believe in Keynesian economics. I'm a big Laffer curve guy. I think we need to grow out of debt. I believe in low regulations, all the stuff that you want to hear from a good country club Republican. Sure, I believe all that. But I also believe in not having corporations, take cheap labor overseas. They don't want to talk about that.
Oh,
But, you know,
that's bad. No.
but they really lose the football when it comes to culture. You wake up every day, you have to go outside. You turn on the TV, that's your day. You look forward to, people used to look forward. I remember, you had some homogeny. Everyone watched Boy Meets World, when I went to school. Everyone watched, whatever. And I know there's different options now, but the predominant culture isn't homogenous. And Republicans have run away from culture issues rather than embrace them, being like, no, what made pure libertarian, like art and all this stuff, libertine is what I like to use the French term, what it made it all possible was strong conservative values,
Oh,
you
thank you
know?
so much for saying that. Okay, I'm going to tell you that I was a libertarian for about 10 years and read, very deeply read all the books and gave it a lot of thought and looked at all, read about the ethics. And then just, COVID was what, made me go, something's really wrong here. There's like this big chunk missing. And so it makes me happy to hear you articulating this. It's like, all right, so we're starting to understand that because, you know, being libertarian has always been very funny because it's like the right gets pissed off at you and the left gets pissed off at you. But
Yeah.
libertarians have been more towards the right in the last decade, I think. And
I think there has to be a truce between Republicans and libertarians.
Mm.
And I think that truce has to come into the fact where libertarians have to realize their philosophy. To be honest, like I agree on a lot of things economically. Like what my most
Yeah,
libertarian position,
economically, it's all good.
my most libertarian position is I don't think there should be a minimum wage at all. I think
Mhm.
you should abolish any of that and have everyone be based off of value. You'd have to deport a lot of people to do that, obviously, blah, blah, blah. But I think when it comes to the social issues, libertarians they stare at a tree and they miss the forest. A
Yeah.
simple thing is like, cannabis use.
Thank you.
Of course I've been around it and I've tried it. I'm was born in 1989. It's been
Right.
ubiquitous in my life. I'm not going to lie about that. And I do see the benefits. And some days, hey, it would be nice to have a joint after, a long day. However, that being said, humans left to their own mechanisms will, a lot of our population is why we have religion. It's why we have fathers and mothers and rules. They
Hmm.
will self, degenerate. And to me, I have no problem if my neighbor wants to smoke a joint in his backyard after a long day. God bless you. It's America. But you want to know what I do have a problem with? I do have a problem with if he starts getting pounds of drugs to his house, if he starts giving it to the neighbor's kids, if he starts selling it out of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So in that aspect, you have to like live in the real world. Not everybody is you. Not everybody is going to put their own self-restraints on things. And I think we're seeing I'm not using weed as a scapegoat, but I think we're seeing a consequence of a lot of these leftist policies. The school is a perfect example with the LGBTQ and the sex stuff. Like you're a senior in high school, you want to put them in an assembly room and be like, listen, when you get to college, you're going to see this, this, this. You want to take special classes, whatever. Like have those conversations, but indoctrinating
Jam it
kids,
down their throat.
yes, indoctrinating children and putting any sort of sex stuff in curriculums like K through 10, is insane. It's literally just trying to destroy young minds. And
Mm.
when you destroy a mind like that, they're more, in my opinion, they're more apt to believe, all these no kings and all these bumper sticker slogans and stuff that they throw at you.
So what are I'm very torn. I have a question about your campaign, but I also like
You can ask me anything. Yeah, you can ask them both.
well, it's like, oh, which direction do I want to go? This is tough.
Well,
So
hopefully I'll come back on. We can do a part two.
okay, all right. So oh, this is hard. I think I'm gonna go with my heart. So education. Interesting.
Yes.
That is, I think that is how big of an issue is that in District 4?
So it's a huge. It is actually, I would say, it is one of the biggest issues, and it's an issue.
I know the condition of the schools in Bridgeport. I'm aware of that.
Yeah. So it's an issue I'm actually very, very passionate about, and it's an interesting one because so you have like Bridgeport, Norwalk, certain districts in Stanford that are a disaster, third world. Like I said, people don't know this number. There's about 58,000 non-English as a second language students in Connecticut right now. 58,000. That makes up about 10 to 12% of the population of the entire student body in Connecticut. The
That's a
entire student,
stress on the system there.
that's 1 out of 10, 1 out of 9, 1 out of 10. And in the cities, it's more like 1 out of 5.
Wow.
So a lot of this underfunding, like in Bridgeport's one of the most overfunded schools and has the most performing results. You know, you have, and I think there's a lot of reasons for it. Like right now in Fairfield County, you pay about $23,000, more per student, and we have our towns like New Canaan, Darien, and Greenwich, and that's part of the deal. You live there, your kid's going to a prep school basically, and he's getting connections. He's going to Duke on a full ride.
Mm.
You're not getting that out of Benell. Trumbull High is one of those schools. It's the same thing. Like, it's getting more expensive because of the outside pressures. So when it comes to the schools, just the immigration issue alone would alleviate a lot of the pressures in CT4. And obviously, we want to dial back up proficiency.
Mm.
I know some schools do it, but we need to get back to like Mississippi is a good example. Like our reading levels in Bridgeport are terrible, and a lot of the schools aren't using phonics.
Mm.
Like simple programs that have to be put in. And I mean, if I may, I'll tie it a little bit into the campaign
Sure.
stuff I would like to campaign on. And, obviously, the stuff I could do right away, like trying to get immigration under control, trying to get we'll do it to Doge CT and get to the bottom, because there's a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse, in those schools that are wasting money and wasting outcomes. Like you have Bob Duff High in Norwalk, which is going to be a 600 million boondoggle. I don't know. Kids can't read.
Mhm.
Like I'd rather spend it, like, obviously this is, just a fantasy, but like if you ask me, like gun to my head, I'd rather spend $600 million literally going one by one and trying to teach kids how to read than to
Mhm.
build a new high school, than to build a new vanity high school. Like, if you,
So I'm going to interrupt you for a minute.
yeah.
So it looks like they're getting to the point where they're going to actually be able to shut down the federal level Department of Education. That's been they're starting to talk about that again. I've noticed that's come up on X a couple of times. So that's going to mean that federal funds start to default to the state Department of Education. And how would you be interacting with that?
Well, so what I think that it should do is, I believe that there should be no federal department, obviously, and
Hmm.
I think that it should be like nothing else. Like I do believe in supporting. Like I believe a rising tide raises all ships,
Hmm.
and when it comes to federal money, I look at it no different than like a business.
Hmm.
If Connecticut is getting high marks, give them extra money, give them extra
Ah,
funding.
like a reward. Okay.
Yeah, and also have stipulations where you can make money. So this is where I was going to tie back into like campaign and like with states being stuff is I think that we're really, really, really thinking short term with schools. And I
Hmm.
have a little bit of a perspective on this because I coach youth hockey. I have Pee Wee's bantam, but I'm still a high school coach.
Hmm.
So I'm around high school kids every day, and I have been for the last 3, 4 years. And I'm telling you, just tangentially, anecdotally, they're dumber. Like, and I'm just talking general knowledge, just having a conversation, like being able to like hear a question,
Hmm.
take it in, respond, and give like an articulate answer. And
Hmm.
that's another podcast. There's a lot of different reasons for that.
Hmm.
But the number one thing I think is obviously public schools aren't going away and they shouldn't go away. Like you do need people, there has to be a place for kids to go. Like society, we have a society,
Right.
and it's healthy. But what I do think, and this is something that's happening in the hockey world on a small level, is I think that we have to reimagine the way that we're going to do our schooling. Like, for example, high school is an easy one. I think that we have to get more aptitude based. I think that we have to get more interactive. And I think that our public schools, obviously, like, we have to get rid of all the crap curriculums and all that. But I think that it should be broken down more into skill based or interest based. Like if you have an engineering mind, it's more of like in the high school you have private or certain sectors where that kid's doing like I did FFA, I did agriculture, where
Hmm.
you're doing that for 2, 3 hours a day and you're learning interactively based off of that. And then you can participate in the general school, like same sports team, same pep rallies, but it's not period 1 through 8. It's not, sit here and do this and, in a classroom of 40. It's okay, you're interested in the agricultural world. When you get to high school, you're going to do that whole thing. Oh, you're more of a mechanical world. We're going to do that in engineering. You're going to be with these 5 teachers and your own, like very, almost like, like very bifurcated.
Hmm.
And the AI stuff, we have to look out for that. There's going to be a lot of lessons now, and I've
Yeah.
seen it with that are personalized.
Hmm.
So I'm not saying that I have all the answers, but when it comes to how I want to tie federal stuff into state stuff when it comes to schooling is, again, back to that business thing. I want these educational committees and states, if a state like Connecticut has a really good solution how to get high marks, that, the federal government should invest in promoting things like that.
Hmm. Hmm.
LaSalle program again. I'm a big believer in bringing back the LaSalle program and getting more, like, to me, that's real make America healthy again.
Hmm.
Driving into these kids when they're young. We don't have to put them in boot camp, but like, again, at some point, it's a little
It's
bit of,
okay to
it's a
have
little bit of,
physical standards.
at some point, it's a little bit of child abuse, and I see it. I see one kid at the rink who's on my team, and then I'll see his brother, and he looks like, the Willy Wonka kid. And I'm just like, at what point is that not child abuse in some way? You know, and I'm not trying to be harsh on anyone. I know people have different lives and people have health problems, but like, we have to live in a society that encourages greatness, that fosters prosperity,
You got to point at
that
something. And
correct.
you know what? Even
Purpose,
if
purpose
you're,
matters. Purpose matters. It
yeah,
does. Purpose
yeah, it
matters.
does. Jason has joined us for those
Hello,
who
Jason.
I'm
Yes.
sorry for being late. I'm sorry for being late. I'm an investigator, and sometimes I can't get away from things as slowly as I'd like to. I had
I,
something that
I,
took
I
longer,
hope you're
but
not. I hope you're not looking into me.
no, 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 not even. Well, I
I'm
look into
kidding.
everybody, but no, not our
The,
guests. We
the
don't do that.
Democrats got that on lockdown. Don't
Yeah,
worry.
they got a. They do. They
I am
do.
not in the Epstein files.
uh,
Good to know. Good to know.
Okay.
I got to tell you real quick. About 4 years ago, a woman from West Hartford, and her last name escapes me, but she came to me one day and said that she had had a minor relationship with Jeff Bezos at some point. She was a really pretty girl too, so I kind of believed it, and that she was privy to some of this list, and she handed me a list of people. This list that is now coming out. Actually, I
I
had
don't
this
doubt it.
4 years ago. Is what I'm telling you.
I don't
She,
doubt it.
yeah, she handed me this list of these people, and she wanted me to look into exposing it all. The systematic slavery that's going on behind the scenes and amongst the most elite. And honestly, at the time, it hadn't been a news story like it is now.
Yeah.
I think Epstein had been killed, just been killed or something like that, not that long before that, or maybe right after that. But at the time, I did a background search on a couple of people, and it just the task seemed overwhelming. How am I going to expose the entire? And I didn't
Yeah.
want to take all her money for something I didn't really think I could help her with. So I did a background. So we went through the list. We picked out two or three people that we didn't think were very famous, and we were going to try to talk to them. But as it turned out, we didn't want to, take her money for something we couldn't do. So I had the list, and I ended up, never hired her. And then all this
Yeah. What are
stuff
you
came
gonna
out.
do?
What are you going to do, right?
Yeah, at least now you don't have to worry about getting shot.
yeah,
Don't have to
and
worry about this.
or or otherwise, Daniel, I want to invite you. I don't know if you've ever been to one of the Connecticut Coalition meetings on Wednesday night.
I,
Um,
I have not. No. I'm
um,
gonna start dialing up and doing all the rounds like I'm doing.
yeah, because
I'm going.
there's some cool stuff going on in there, and it's nice to know they're Wednesday nights, not next week, because next week is we're going into Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
Um,
this Sunday
but
night.
but one of the things that's been going on, this so Jason knows, is that we have some whistleblowers in this state, and one who runs that particular event, her mail has been choked. Her Verizon, they can't find her bill. What's the other thing? There's like they keep losing her bills. They can't,
Oh,
nothing.
listen, Connecticut is a very clandestine state.
Yeah.
Down here in Norwalk, I mean, anyone can do their own research, but what happened to John Flynn?
Oh
Whether
yeah,
you
yeah, we know
whether
him. We interviewed him.
That's
whether
amazing what happened. Yep.
whether you agree with him or not, whether you think he's crazy or not, it doesn't matter. He's a nice man, and
Mhm.
what the state did to him is, to me, the definition of you know communist
Soviet.
power.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Soviet
Soviet
style
power.
government. Yeah.
It's just
Yep.
like I said, at any other time in America, you would just look at that person and be like, oh, like that's nice, like that, you know what I mean? And the
Mhm.
fact, and that's why it's a very interesting time to navigate. And I know it's a tired phrase, but people really do have to look at things from three different angles because
Right.
Jason, we were talking before is, a lot of the antithesis of my politics is realizing that there is no choice for people my age who want to start a family, have a modest income, buy a house in Trumbull, Connecticut. Not that crazy, and you don't want the government to do it for you. You just want, a decent job that doesn't go to a
Right.
foreigner
Want to earn
or,
it.
and a
Right.
school that, helps your kid, actually succeed in life instead of indoctrinating them. Like, I don't think that that's too much to ask.
Mhm.
And the Democrats in Connecticut now, I can't speak for their voters. Their voters, they're loyal. You got to give them that. but the party leadership, they are 21st century communists. They're Bolshevik
Yep.
type of politicians, and
They're not American.
you know, and
They're
no, and I don't
not
think,
American ideal.
and I don't think that that's, people always like to say like, oh, you're inciting, you're calling people this, that, and I'm like, I'm not really doing that, because in my opinion, to use one of their phrases, actions speak louder than words. When you wake up and everything is upside down,
Mm.
when you see even moderate positions that I thought I wasn't even like, quote unquote Democrat on, I'm
Yeah.
like, whoa, 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 what's going on here?
Right.
A simple thing. Snap is a simple thing. I never thought I'd be in a weird defense. Like, Snap needs to be, it's a joke and it shows you how evil they are, that they were holding the government hostage for
Yeah.
Snap. Shows you
Right.
how evil they are.
It
But
is evil.
it also is revealing, because it put me in a position to think about this for a second. I was like, let me think. Do I actually hate Snap? No, I don't. I believe in social safety nets. I just don't believe they should be a lifestyle.
Mm.
Hand up, not a handout, right?
Right.
Right.
And then you start digging into the numbers and you realize that 35 that 35% of the SNAP in Connecticut is going to people that were here in the last decade, that
Yeah.
just showed up.
Yeah.
And then you start to realize that you're just creating an entire underclass of voters to push through policy that the actual taxpayers don't want. Now,
Right.
I don't care if you call it racism. I don't care what you want to call it. It's just it's a dereliction of duty, and it's a betrayal to your constituents, from dog catcher to president. I really don't care.
It's dark. It creates learned helplessness.
Yeah.
Well, that's what it's
Assuming that this is all aside from the fraud piece.
And you want to know what's really sad about this? So I don't know if Jason knows, but the first lady is a very proud Black woman. Um, so it hits near and dear to my heart, because she voted for Trump last election and stuff like that. And she's in a different situation. But I go to Bridgeport. Color Positive Thought is a great organization. Harry Bell is the guy, um, and I've done work with them. And what's very interesting, and I think Republicans are starting to forget, we talked about earlier, the big tents almost,
Mm.
Mhm.
and I think Republicans are starting to forget the fact that the number one people that are being screwed by these economic policies, by these immigration policies, by these bad schools, even if I can go all the way back to the COVID policies, the lockdowns, it's the Black inner city kids
Hmm.
or the
Yeah.
Hispanic. Those are
Yeah.
the people that are losing years of education. They are unhealthy. They're diabetic. They have no
Yep.
hope. They're living in squalor. And I don't know, call me a leftist, call me whatever. Like, when I'm walking down the street in Bridgeport or going to Wonderland, to go coach a game, like, I don't like to see homeless people. It makes me
Right.
sad.
Yeah.
I prefer if they had like a little job. Like, I don't know. Am I crazy for that? That I don't want that? Like, and
Yeah.
we have the capacity, we have the dilapidated infrastructure. It just takes a little bit of a will and a little bit of investment. Why can't Amazon build a factory in Bridgeport, and everyone
Well,
can get a job
I
in it?
think it's good that that's good that there's so many trillions of dollars of investment coming into this country because of
It's
Trump's policies.
fantastic.
Yeah.
It's
You're going to
fantastic.
see it develop over the next. But I heard some interesting comment the other day. Homelessness is not a problem of economics.
Well, you
It's a
stumbled on one of
problem of
my
it's a problem of drug addiction and mental illness.
Hmm.
one of my big I like to troll Rosa DeLauro and Chris Murphy, saying that we should reopen Fairfield Hills and name the building after the Rosa DeLauro Memorial mental hospital.
Purple people eater.
But yeah, but to be fair, not to be jovial, but I do think, Jason, you are right about that. And I think one of the biggest things, like, if we want to talk about values, I think it's valuable for society not to let people do drugs in the streets, not to let people be homeless. And we should reopen state mental hospitals. I think that that's a good investment. And
Yeah.
anyone who wants to say, like that's the one thing about the left that cracks me up. Like, you say something like that and they're like, "Oh, you want to throw people in straitjackets?" I'm like, buddy, grow
Whoa.
up, stop watching The Jacket with Adrian Brody. Okay. And I was just like, it's the 21st century. I don't think anybody would want that. And I'd be first in line if there was anything untoward going on. And B, like we can, again, I don't understand in this country or the generation that's in power. We were talking about schools before when you came in, but like something like this, I'm a big believer in mental health. Like I do think there's a mental health crisis. So when I say state mental
Yes.
hospitals, or when I say something like LaSalle program, I'm not just talking about physical fitness in high schools or just talking about like, putting homeless people in there. Like, why can't we reimagine the way it looks where it's like, okay, there's some kids who aren't doing well in high school, like bring them to nature's classroom,
Mm,
Mhm.
have programs like that. Or, same thing when it comes to, Rain Man, famous movie, believe it or not, that was Southbury Training School, and it got a bad rap. My parents lived in Southbury, and it was a self-sufficient place. Like people farmed. It's very holistic, and we could
Mhm.
take those ideas and, like I said, 21st century. Like we're not the same. We have a better understanding. We're not as inhumane as and I wouldn't even say call those people inhumane. They just didn't know a lot of them.
Right.
So
Right.
there's no reason, and like to bring it back to my campaign, these are types of things I would never make promises on those things like that. I'd be one lowly congressman, but
Mm.
I do believe in moving the Overton window, and I think part of being a Republican and building the tent is actually talking about shit that we don't talk about enough with these corporate tax cuts. Nobody can open a business, so
mhm,
like I actually don't care. 39%, 36%, okay, sure. Like how come there isn't a tax window for someone who has a tangible business proposition?
mhm,
Mhm.
Just simple things like that. I think we have to start focusing on rather than getting bogged down in this guy's the litmus test. This guy's a rhino. This guy's this. You don't support this person or you don't support that.
that
Like,
stuff,
like
oh my God, that stuff drives me so insane.
When you
America.
fundamentally support an income tax in general, you're not. It's not the right way to tax people. You tax through sales. Then the incentive is there for the government is incentives for your company to grow as well because they get more tax money out of it that way.
Well, that's what the one thing we were talking about rhinos a little bit before, and the one thing where I break with I'm a big Laffer Art Laffer economics guy. Um, if your listeners know who that is. And one of the big things for me is I kind of laugh when I'm, at the country club and, talking to some of these very successful, God bless them, very successful Republicans.
Hmm.
But, they don't realize that we're kind of living in a soft oligarchy, my guy. The market's not that free. It's
Yeah,
not that free, man.
Not like it
yeah,
was. No.
it's
It's
not.
it's not like it was. Like I don't know, when I was growing up, like again, like this is a lot of my politics. I try to ground myself and shape them in like like reality a little bit. Like
Mhm,
what when I was growing up, I remember there was this place called Funny Bones in Monroe. It was just a little comic book store, and they sold
mhm.
candy and stuff like that. And I used to be able to walk to it. And like, when I think about stuff like that randomly, and I think about it in today's economic landscape, I'm like, oh, that just doesn't exist anymore. If I want that, I have to order it from Amazon. And I'm not saying, like, again, I'm realistic. I understand we live in an interchanging commerce world and stuff like that. But we've
Hmm.
also we've also made it possible. The housing's a perfect example. If you own a home and you want to just buy land and maybe put up like a little bit of, rental, say tiny houses, right?
Right,
You bought
right.
10 acres in Connecticut. And you just want to put some tiny houses on and rent them out, which honestly, when I was 25, I would have rented it,
Hmm.
done,
Sure.
with my Sheba.
Right.
You can't do that in Connecticut. You can't build. You can't do anything. The regulations, you can't open a business. There's no salt
You can't
deduction.
put a trail if you want to buy a little tract of land and put a little trailer on it to live in. You can't do that
Nope, you
either.
can't have a dwelling. And
Nothing
again,
that'll
like
save you money. They want
a
you to
lot
pay
of
the
things,
full freight.
correct. And a lot of things, of course it ties back to immigration, but a lot of it is just common sense. I hate using that phrase because Republicans relying on it, but the back to New England values, New England values have always been where we have forged our own success. We have been able to, one of the, what's very interesting to me. Now I'm thinking about New England. If you ever looked at a map, right? The old atlases we used to get, not that people can read maps anymore, but
Mhm.
Connecticut, 169 towns. One of the craziest things when I got into like, politics and learning about these districts and stuff, like, for example, like you go to, I don't know, Texas, right? Your congressional district is basically the size of our state.
Yeah, right, right.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, and like, I remember when I was playing hockey, because I played down south in the minors and I would get to travel and stuff. And it's actually like mind blowing. We're the only region that, like I said, New London, New England, that was set up to be that original experiment,
Yeah.
broken up into small towns, having our own little social square and our own little way where we all fit into one giant overall purview of like what we wanted. And it was, you know, one of my favorite things about what I remember going to college in Massachusetts, obviously. Uh, we wish I could go back some days, but don't we all, right?
Yeah.
But I remember, and it was a little bit of a thing like here when I was playing high school, hockey. But I remember being in Massachusetts, and you'd be at the parties, you're hitting on girls and whatever. And I remember my teammates, the guys who were locals, so a lot of good hockey players in Massachusetts, they'd be like, "Dude, you're talking to that girl? She's from Methuen. Don't talk to that girl." I would never talk to a girl from Methuen. I was like, "What?" It's like, "Yeah, she's from," and then they're like, "Oh, she's from Charleston." Like I hate Charleston. My point being is the town rivalries
Yeah.
are so great, and I think that's a good thing. That means that towns are competing for a slice of the economic pie. They're trying to outdo each other in a healthy American way.
Right.
Now we're trying to take that away. We're trying to make all towns suffer equally under Hartford communism, under DC communism, whatever you
Yeah.
want to call it. And really, like that's all it is to me.
Yeah. It is. It's got to be changed, and it starts with the grab of the people, from the bottom up, really, because the top
Yeah.
down, it's just there's so many politicians and people I've run into over the last year that there's a lot of passive support. A lot of people are afraid. We have 20 committee members that want to fix the committee that don't want to speak up, though. They're afraid to piss off the leadership. And there's a lot
Yeah.
of there.
Well, to me, there's nobody. My number one enemy in Connecticut Republican politics, and I think it should be everyone's number one enemy, is Chairman Ben Porco, the
Yes,
fat
thank
guy,
you.
the fat guy who just goes around eating cold chicken and has completely dissuaded and diluted and destroyed the Connecticut Republican Party. And I don't care what anyone says; it all falls on him.
Yeah, he's
And
corrupt.
I will get the endorsement regardless of him. I have built my own political things, and I will say one thing: Fairfield County is not the rest of the state party. We have our own issues down here. We have rhino issues down here, like
Sure.
like everywhere else.
Like everywhere else,
But
yeah.
the one thing is that we are a little successful down here. We have some money.
Yeah.
So the well-run RTCs are very well run, like Darien. New Canaan does a good job.
Yeah.
And Fazio's a friend. But the way the state party has run, the way they have completely lacked any sort of direction, they've lacked any sort of recruitment, they've lacked any sort of accountability. To
That
me, it's very
fundraising, it goes across the board.
to me it's very simple. We have 5 congressional districts. We should have the CTGOP should be in 5 districts. There should be one committee president or whatever district president
Yeah.
That was
every
your
that
mandate.
every that every RTC has to every month do a sales call. How many people did you recruit? What
Mm.
events are you trying to do? And those districts can pool money, and then you can have the state party overseeing it, one man who is looking for results. One of the biggest things to me is there is no outreach to anybody under the age of 35 in this
Oh
state.
God,
The
yeah. We're
everything,
trying
even
to do that. We're actually trying to do
yeah,
that.
but I mean,
We're working
even
on that.
even Aaron Stewart's thing today, it's $100, $200. It's big, like no one cares. No one wants to be told who to vote for and then have to have a surcharge to do it. They don't charge you an entrance fee to go into Stop and Shop to buy milk.
Right.
So why should we have an entrance fee to the GOP? Why are the RTCs such a closed thing? It should be opened up to any voter. I don't care what you're registered. One of my biggest things when I was knocking on doors in my first Bob Duff run, they give you an app, right? This is
Oh
a
yeah.
Republican.
Yep. Know
This
the
is a
app.
Republican House. I'm not good with technology. You know what I did? I was like, you know what? I'm sick and tired of this. I picked a neighborhood and I knocked on all the doors.
Yeah,
If they
PG, the
answered,
old-fashioned way.
I knocked on all the doors. And you want to know? A lot of times they were Democrats on a field, be like, "Oh, I voted Democrat my whole life," and I would just go, "Why?" You know, and
You
a
know
lot
what? There's something to be said for that because honestly, given the major shift to the far left that the Democratic Party establishment is taking, to me, there's got to be a huge number of disaffected Democratic voters
There,
that are
and you
right
know
for the
what? It's
taking
not
that be
even.
talked into voting the right way.
And I'll take it a step further. I think that a lot of times us political people, you know, get a little too analytical about this, because
Mhm.
we're very passionate about it.
Right.
It's much simpler than that. Most people in Connecticut, the unaffiliated, the independents, they're not crazy. They're our neighbors. Like I said, New England values. We all watch the Yankees or the Red Sox and go to Little League. It's like as bad as things are here, it's still pretty good.
Right.
Like I don't want to be one of those Republicans that, pretends that like, Fairfield's an awful town. It's not. There's still a
Yeah.
lot of good things in Fairfield.
Sure.
But, you know, the one thing that we have to realize is not only is that eroding, but most people that are just continuing voting Democrat, it's out of habit. They've never met a Republican. No
Right.
one's ever,
Oh,
no
yeah,
one's,
that's a really good
That's why you
point.
got to go ground
no
game.
one, no one's ever said, "Hey, I'm a Republican. Like I'm normal." Like I'm not. Granted, I know my X feed can, be a little, but it's bombastic, and that's what you said. That's the town square. I'm on a soapbox. I have to get my message across. But
Right.
come meet me. My idea in the campaign when I really get into it, I hope to not only, like I said, of course I'm going to be outspent. Of course, I don't, like it doesn't matter if I raised $1 million, I'd still be 14 million short of Jim Himes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
well,
so I'm not worried about that. I think I'm excited to get creative. There's a lot of things you could do around here. A lot of free parks, but like to me, why not have a field day? Wolf Park in Monroe, rent the park out for 2 hours. Don't make it that political. Be like, hey, come here. You want to talk to me about things like this is my politics in a nutshell. I want to keep this park clean. I
Town
want to
hall
make your
picnic.
I want to make your tout. I want to make your tax dollar actually have meaning again. And I want to get back to a little bit of basic red, white, and blue republicanism. Is that so? Is that so crazy?
Yeah.
Is that so insane?
That's
And
good you say
and
that because we started off as make when we started this movement a year ago. It was about flipping Connecticut red, right? But
yeah,
lately, I've been changing that. Let's flip it red, white, and blue.
yeah. I mean, to me, it's
Especially
just
we're getting away from
that's
that. We got to get back to that.
that's why whatever people feel about the messaging from the White House right now. Like I said, I love Mr. Trump. I voted for him 3 times, but America First to me is still the best slogan. And
Of course.
CT to me, like as a candidate, it's CT first, then America first. And it's not because I'm disloyal to, but I kind of fall back to, my history nerd a little bit is, General Bobby Lee said I'm a Virginian first, I'm a
Yep.
nutmegger first.
Yep.
If I can benefit my district, not in a Democrat sleazy way, if I could do something where tangible for my district or something that would bring jobs, like you said, the investment, you know one of the
maybe
things in
bring some
Connecticut.
businesses back into Connecticut. How about that?
Well, one of my biggest things besides the pipeline, energy is economy.
Oh my
You don't
God.
have an economy without energy. But
Right.
there's we have a labyrinth of education in this state, especially downward. Like I mean, New Haven. I know it's CT5, but New Haven, the Merritt Parkway
No,
is
New Haven's 3.
or three. I'm sorry, but okay, but my point is that
Oh,
uh, Stanford to New Haven's the Merritt Parkway, right?
yep.
And
Yep.
in between Stanford and New Haven, you have UConn to Yale, and then you have Sacred Heart, you got Fairfield, and
Yep.
then we can go upstate. You got actual UConn, you got Conn College, you got Hart. My point is we have a labyrinth of highly educated, highly skilled workers right here. Not just Connecticut, all across New England. You go up to Mass. Why aren't we trying to shift our economy into making computer chips here? Why aren't we making more medical equipment? 80% of our pharmaceuticals are made in China. That doesn't
Yeah.
sound good for national security. Why
Oh,
aren't we
no.
opening up? I'm not a Purdue Pharma guy. Trust me, I do not like big pharma at all. But why aren't we, trying to innovate generics? Why aren't we loosening restrictions so in my opinion, there's no reason we couldn't have a Tesla here, an app.
Mhm.
I'm not that type of guy, but you see all these companies move to Florida or move to Austin or move to stuff like that. And again, I wouldn't be governor or stuff like or anything like that, but maybe we can move the Overton window to make New England manufacture again. Lamont wants to use all this dilapidated, abandoned buildings, which a lot of them is manufacturing buildings. He wants to use them to house illegal immigrants because that's really what it is, and the overflow of New York transits. It's not for regular nutmeggers.
Right.
I look at that and I'm like, why isn't there a shoe factory? What happened to Jumanji?
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Like I like to say things like that to get a visual in people's head. I'm not unrealistic saying we could turn the clock back all the way like that, but there is a middle ground.
Hmm.
There is a middle economic ground where,
There's room for manufacturing in Connecticut for sure.
in my opinion, if you get a GED from high school and you graduate high school in Connecticut as a good student and a good person, you
Hmm.
should be able to find a job that you could eventually buy a house on. You're not gonna
Especially
have a
if you're,
Have a
especially
family.
if you're doing some of the
Yep.
specialty schools you were talking about
Yep,
earlier. Yeah.
sorry, you're not gonna have Huey Long. Every man a king. Not everyone deserves a crown.
Right.
You might not have a mansion. You
Yeah.
might not have this or that, but guess what? You're gonna live in Trumbull.
Right.
Your kids are gonna go to Trumbull High. They're gonna play
Trumbull's
for
a
the
nice
Trumbull
town.
Ray.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're gonna play Trumbull Lily. And honestly, the older I get,
Monroe,
I
Shelton.
yeah, the older I get, I don't think Americans want more than 1,800 square feet that they own. A couple. Bring their kids
That's
to a
a
couple
lot
ball
to
games.
clean.
Yeah,
Speaking,
younger
speaking as the
generation.
person who cleans the house, that's
Yeah,
way too much.
I'm not good with numbers. I don't know, whatever it is, 1,000, whatever it is. I'm not good with numbers. But
Yeah.
my point is that I don't think that people want a lot. They just want the government to stop holding them back.
That's correct.
And really at the core of my politics, that's what it is. And on any given day, someone could call me a leftist or a rightist or whatever. And honestly, my message to you and to anyone connected is I just don't care.
Hmm.
Like, you can get yourself all in up in a tiffy, call me whatever you want. I'm glad I'm in your head. Like, to me, I'm a Republican. I'm going to be on the GOP ticket. I will never not be a Republican. And that's that. Like, you can do your own mental gymnastics. Like, I don't care. Like, I care about defeating the left, and that's it. And if you're a rhino who wants to vote for me, or if you want to go and feel better about yourself and say, like, oh, he's an unprincipled conservative, okay, dude, cool. You were a loser in high school. You're still a loser now. Like, like that's the calculation in my brain. And whether people like it or not, I guess it'll be up to them.
Sounds like you got the fight in you, man. That's what we need.
I guess.
I've talked to hundreds of people over this last year, and I'm actually on my phone. I have a lot of my phone only had like 121 contacts on it when I started this. Now it's like 480 or something. So
Yeah.
I put a little designation on my contacts on my iPhone. Just put the letter F, meaning fighter.
Oh, that's good. I listen. If you're gonna actually manually change a contact, then that's high praise. I know how hard that is.
Yeah, so because the ones that have the F in front of their name are the ones that like we all want to fix. All of us, most of us, like we all want to fix Connecticut and get it in the right track, and make the Republican Party a true opposition party.
Yeah.
But there very few amongst all of us that are willing to go to the mat for it.
Yeah.
To
And
fight for it, stand on the front lines, if you will.
well, that is we have to wind down here, but that I appreciate it. I'll definitely come back on. But unless you guys have any last questions, anything that you got on your?
Oh no,
I
this is
think we're
great.
there. We can wind down. That's all
Oh yeah.
good.
It's
No,
been great having you. We'll have you again for sure. I'm
yeah. No,
sorry
I
I came
appreciate
late.
it. It's okay. And like I said, I just wanted to carry off on your message is what I would say to all the Republicans in Connecticut or all the people who want to vote Republican is I would say that Ben Proto and the people you see that are making most of the noise in the wrong ways, they don't represent you. They don't represent our movement, what we're trying to do. And I do think that there's light at the end of the tunnel. And I do think that people are waking up and we have to just not worry about, they want us to infight is my point. They want us to infight. They want us to try to make each other go through hoops to prove to each other that we're worthy of their vote. And the constituent is worthy of someone to represent them. That is what we should be focusing on, not who's the best representative of this GOP or this GOP or that. Who's gonna bring back a little bit of prosperity to their district again? Who's gonna bring back a little bit of chance and hope again? And I think that that's the message that we should all settle on.
I agree. I agree 100%. We're working on flooding what I call flooding the RTCs, getting new regular people to start showing up at the and DTC meetings for that matter, and volunteer and join up and start getting more regular people involved. And that's where we fix it, really.
I'm in, yes.
Yep.
Main Street economics, baby.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. We'll have you back soon and enjoy and good luck to everything. If you need anything from us, let us know.
I will. Just support, support, support. Dan Miressi, CT on X, and DanielMiressi.com.
All
Got
right.
it.
All
All
right.
right. Thank
God
you.
bless Connecticut.
God
God
bless
bless
Connecticut.
Connecticut. God bless America.